And we are back with part 4 of this week's reading of Exodus, chapters 5 through 15 of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible, Tree of Life version, TLV. And before we paused, we were going through the plagues that was sent to Egypt, but yet Pharaoh just did not want to let the people go. God had his heart hardened, and he just was not going to give. At one point, he was going to let the men go. Then he relented. He was going to let the people go, but not the cattle. And it was like he was playing this little game of control, but God had control. And God was actually controlling the hardening of his heart as well. So now we're about ready to get into chapter 12. Where God in the previous chapter, in chapter 11, was actually getting the children of Israel, Benaiah Israel, ready for the final plague, and that was death. So now we're moving into chapter 12, the Passover lamb. Now Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month will mark the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one lamb for the household. But if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor are to take one according to the number of the people, according to each person eating. You are to make your count for the lamb. Your lamb is to be without blemish, a year-old male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You must watch over it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to slaughter it at twilight. They are to take the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the crossbeam of the houses where they will eat it. They are to eat the meat that night roasted over fire with matzah and bitter herbs. They are to eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled with water, but only roasted with fire, its head with its legs and its innards. So let nothing of it remain until morning. Whatever remains until morning, you are to burn with fire. Also, you are to eat this way, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You are to eat it in haste. It is Adonai's Passover. So this is the introduction of Passover. For I will go through the land of Egypt on that night and strike down every firstborn, both men and animals. And I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt. I am Adonai. The blood will be a sign for you in the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. So there will be no plague among you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day is to be a memorial for you. You are to keep it as a feast to Adonai. Throughout your generations, you are to keep it as an eternal ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat matzah, but on the first day you must remove hametz from your houses. And that's the leaven. And leaven signifies sin, actually. That is why it is and this is actually, and I'm going to make the comparison as Yeshua, our Passover lamb, who actually was unblemished. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit. You are to remove hametz from your houses, which is the leaven. For whoever eats hametz from the first day until the 7th day, that soul will be cut off from Israel. The first day is to be a holy assembly for you, as well as the 7th day. No manner of work is to be done on those days except what is to be eaten by every person, that alone may be prepared by you. So you are to observe the Feast of Matzah, and that's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. For on this very day, same day, have I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you are to observe this day throughout your generations as an eternal ordinance. During the first month in the evening of the 14th day of the month, you are to eat matzah. until the evening of the 21st day of the month. For 7 days no hametz is to be found in your houses, for whoever eats hametz, that soul will be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is an outsider or one who is born in the land. You are to eat no hametz, no leavened bread, no yeast, in other words. In all of your houses you are to eat matzah. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said to them, go select lambs for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. You are to take a bundle of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and apply it to the crossbeam and two doorposts with the blood from the basin. None of you may go out of the door of his house until morning. Adonai will pass through to strike down the Egyptians, but when he sees the blood on the crossbeam of the two doorposts, Adonai will pass over that door and will not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to strike you down. Also, you are to observe this event as an eternal ordinance for you and your children. When you come into the land which Adonai will give you as he has promised, you are to keep this ceremony. Now, when it happens that your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean to you? You are to say, it is the sacrifice of Adonai's Passover, because he passed over the houses of Benaiah Israel in Egypt when he struck down the Egyptians, but spared our households. So the people bowed their heads and worshipped. Then Benaiah Israel went and did it. They did just as Adonai commanded Moses and Aaron, and so it came about at midnight that Adonai, struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on the throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn cattle. Then Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud wailing in Egypt. For there was not a house where someone was not dead. So he called for Moses and Aaron at night and said, rise up, go out from my people, both you and Benaiah Israel. Go, serve Adonai as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds as you said, and be gone. But bless me too. Now the Egyptians urged the people, sending them out of the land quickly, for they thought, we will all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, with their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes on their shoulders. So Benaiah Israel acted according to the word of Moses. They asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. Adonai gave the people favor in the eyes of the Egyptians and let them have what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians. So now I'm going to pause this for a moment. When we think back, and we were discussing Abraham and the dream that Adonai had given Abraham, he actually showed Abraham this time frame where the people would be 400 years in bondage, but he also told Abraham that they would leave this land richer than what they were stuck in it during that 400 year period. And this is exactly what is happening, what was shown to Abraham so long ago. Now, then Benaiah Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, as well as children. Also a mixed multitude went up with them, along with the flocks, herds, and heavy livestock. They had baked matzah cakes from the dough that they had brought out of Egypt. It had no hametz, no leaven, meaning no yeast, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not delay, so they had not made provisions for themselves. Now the time that Benaiah Yisrael lived in Egypt was 430 years. So it happened at the end of 430 years, to the very day that all the armies of Adonai went out from the land of Egypt. It was a night of watching for Adonai to bring them out of the land of Egypt. This same night is a night of vigil for Adonai for all Bnei Israel throughout their generations. Then Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner may eat it, but every man's servant that is brought that is bought for money, after you have circumcised it, him may eat it. Nor should a visitor or hired servant eat it. It is to be eaten inside a single house. You are not to carry the meat out of the house, nor are you to break any of its bones. All of the congregation of Israel must keep it, but if an outsider dwells with you, who would keep the Passover for Adonai? All his males must be circumcised, then let him draw near and keep it. He will be like one who is native to the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat from it. The same Torah applies to the native as well as the outsider who dwells among you. So all Bnei Israel did so. They did just as Adonai commanded Moses and Aaron. It was on the very day that Adonai brought Bnei Israel out of the land of Egypt as armies. Now, in the footnotes, there's Hebrews 11:28, and that says, "By faith he kept the Passover and the smearing of the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch them." Now, I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert here. When we go to Luke 22, verse 19, this is Yeshua saying, "Do this in memory of me." And when he had taken matzah and offered the bracha, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "Take, this is my body given for you. Do this in memory of me." And that's unleavened bread. He's using the matzah. In the same way, he took the cup after the meal, saying, "This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." So we were dealing with blood, and I'm going to talk a little bit more, like I said, in detail about this Passover lamb and how it relates to Yeshua. When we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 5, removing the hametz from your house, which is the leaven, the sin, the yeast. We look at chapter 5, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. Get rid of the old hametz, so you may be a new batch, just as you are unleavened, for Messiah, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Therefore, let us celebrate the feast, not with old hametz, the hametz of malice and wickedness, but with unleavened bread, the matzah of sincerity and truth. And there's another passage in 1 Corinthians 11 when we speak of Yeshua, starting with verse 23. "For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you, that the Lord Yeshua, on the night he was betrayed, took matzah. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in memory of me.' In the same way, he also took the cup after supper, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in memory of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.'" So this is in memory, and this is also known as Holy Communion, also. But we're going to talk about how some of this has all come about as we're reading through some of this. And again, we talked about types and shadows, and I'm not sure if my counter's working, so I'm going to pause this. I'm really having a problem with this online recorder and the counter. So I will be back with the next part, and we're going to actually get into chapters 13, 14, and 15. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the Passover lamb, and how this relates as a type and shadow of what is to come when Yeshua became our Passover lamb. So I will be back.